It's lovely to be with you. I must say we lost about 30 seconds of your introduction. But I've just got a few remarks. I can't be there because I'm on leave. And I've also got, I think, what is referred to as COVID. But I will know by this afternoon whether it's actually COVID, but I'm at home for obvious reasons. I would like to also acknowledge that I'm on Gadigal land of the Eora Nation and like to offer my respect to elders past and present and emerging. Owen, if you could just go to the next slide. Just to give a brief perspective on Sydney Nano, I'm here as Director of Sydney Nano. We are one of the university's flagship multidisciplinary initiatives. We are 5-6 years old. And the very quick narrative is that although anchored initially in the physical sciences, as you can see from this slide, we have an hour whole of university initiative with excellent engagement across all of the faculties. And the three areas that we are working externally, as highlighted on the image on the right-hand side, are the life sciences, smart functional materials, renewables, and sustainability. So we are aligning with many of the key global challenges, particularly the UN sustainability goals, and an exemplar of multidisciplinarity. Next slide, Moen. We live in interesting times, and I wanted to just talk through a couple of global, national, local perspectives. The last 2 years have really exemplified the vital role that nanotechnology has and is playing, particularly around infectious disease and vaccines. I think the Pfizer vaccine is an exemplar of nanotechnology. It's also worth noting that in your smartphone, your microchip has 5 billion components. The feature size of the components is down at the order of 10 nanometers. So nanotechnology is part of our lives. Last year, the world agreed to make a strong commitment to climate change. COP26 was a real tipping point, and that's cascaded into a national priorities. And of course, the UN sustainability goals are front and center in everything we do. There's also been a time to reimagine universities in Australia in particular. This is on the bottom left, it's just a piece from a group of 8 policy statement that talks about universities being reconceived as mission-oriented, and I think that's very timely. And of course, we've got a national government strongly emphasising translation, which is the focus of the conversation we're having this morning. Trailblazers initiative, an example. We've got now a commercialisation strategy with identified areas of priority. And of course, at a state level, we have already significant investment, a progressive state across renewables, decarbonisation. Gabrielle Upton, the Chief Scientist, Minister Alistair Henskins. And if you look at the recent New South Wales competitive advantage, a roadmap, it highlights a number of areas such as medtech, agtech, fintech, quantum computing and robotics that are all very close to Sydney Nano's domain. Next slide, Moen. My last slide is just to acknowledge my wonderful team colleagues who are partly with us today. Some of them aren't. Stephanie Watson is actually on holidays in Fiji. I'm pleased that she got out of the country. I'm very proud to be working with the colleagues. I'm thrilled that Ali is leading the portfolio with Stephanie on the innovation industry commercialisation portfolio, which is clearly a priority for the university. So I look forward to the session this morning. Back to you, Ali, and hope you're all well and have a good weekend. Thanks very much.
Proceed to the next session, but before we do that, I'd like to also acknowledge my co-chairs in setting up this event. Ruth Policeman from the Sydney Knowledge Hub, where she is director. Session is titled The Research Commercialization Value of Death Challenge. And this will be introduced by Professor Kentai. And can I ask you, Kentai, to come forward and present
that to be co-chairing these workshops and facilitate these sessions on the research commercialization's value of that challenge. So it is important to acknowledge the challenges faced by researchers aspiring to commercialize and deliver impact research into societies. So the Faculty of Engineering has been delivering world-leading research outcomes in close collaborations with the industries for decades. So we are addressing global challenges in energies, materials, waters, food, digitals, and circular economy, and many more. So more recently, we have at the faculties launched the Net Zero Initiative, focusing on addressing the climate challenges with around more than 100 researchers from across the campus. So many faculties of engineering researchers are involved in translations and commercializations activities already. So I look forward to supporting such important engagements in this direction, in alignment with the university's commercializations and government's directions on this. So those who succeed in crossing the value of that know the risk, challenges, and even rewards of the commercialization. So we will hear about some success stories later in this workshops, and of course encouraging one as well. But first, I would like to introduce to you a couple of speakers, Professor Julie Carney and Natasha Rowling, to address the topics. So first speakers, we have Professor Julie Carney. She's the Pro-Vice Chancellor, Research Enterprise and Engagements at the University of Sydney, leading the implementations of the research industry, government's community research engagement strategies, and she supports the research portfolio work in growing research income across the university. So without further delay,
Yes, so my name is Julie Carney. I'm a Pro-Vice Chancellor, Research Enterprise and Engagement here at the university. I've kind of aimed this talk at the novice to research commercialisation, and what I'm hoping to achieve is to convince you that this is something that you should consider, translation and commercialisation of research, even though it's not necessarily something people think of as their core business as academics. And maybe just give you a little bit of an overview of some of the resources that are available inside and outside of the university to support that type of activity. So I just want to start maybe reiterating what Ben said in the introduction about how research commercialisation is absolutely a priority for our current federal government. And in February, they announced this Research Commercialisation Action Plan. It's $2 billion of funding to support the commercialisation of university research. So they are truly committed to seeing this done better and successfully across universities within Australia. And arguably, a lot of this is new money to the sector. And I personally believe that the initiatives that are coming out of this are absolutely sector changing. This is a little overview of the initiatives that are coming through as part of this action plan. And I also believe that if we see a change in government with this election that's just recently been called, that a new government will come in and probably continue to pursue this agenda. I think this is something that's important to both parties in politics. So this scheme includes something called an economic accelerator. That's going to be a very, very large stage-gated competitive funding program that will provide new ventures with funding to prove that they the product or the service that they're going to be offering as a result of their commercialisation journey has a market, and then further funding to build and expand those businesses. There's going to be $1.6 billion available within this scheme over the next 10 years, and that's a really, really substantial change to the kind of venture capital market in Australia. They're providing additional funding to a specific venture capital organisation, CSIRO Main Sequence Ventures. There's 150 million allocated there. Importantly for our sector, there are going to be a very large number of fellowships and PhDs for researchers that are interested in either working with industry, moving back and forth between industry and academia, or to focus on commercialisation activities. So 1,800 industry-based PhDs, 800 fellowships, and I'm going to talk a bit about those fellowships in a moment. New IP frameworks, probably less impactful than some of the other initiatives here. And then this big Trailblazer program, which is to support universities with research commercialisation. And they are also, in red here, looking at adjusting the way that universities receive funding based on how they perform with industry engagement and commercialisation. So there's going to be a big incentive for universities to promote and support this type of activity. This is a description of those different fellowships which are going to be administered by the ARC, and I think the first round of these is actually going to be announced in the next couple of months. So there are going to be laureate fellowships for people who are interested in pursuing commercialisation activity. There are going to be future fellowship level type activities to buy out people's time to allow them to focus on this type of thing. There's going to be early career fellowships, so the equivalent of a DECRA, but for industry activity, as well as this very, very large number of PhD students available for projects with industry. And the vision of the government is that we will have an environment where researchers really can move in and out of the university environment through these different types of fellowship programs. So the middle diagram there is the vision of how you can have a research career that spans both commercialisation or industry and conventional academic career. And another reason to consider doing this is that there's going to be really big enhancements. There's already quite good support for commercialisation activity. So we have schemes from federal government and New South Wales government. So I'm not going to list those. And there's some very good venture capital support available. UniSeed have just announced a deal with a UniSuper. They've got an additional $75 million to support ventures that come out of the 5 universities, including University of Sydney, that are involved with UniSeed. So there's kind of lots of exciting opportunities to support this type of activity. I want to show you just an example of one of our many entrepreneurial professors at this university. This is Patrick Brennan, who founded the company DetectDeadX. He's an expert in basically imaging, medical imaging, and he's a very successful academic researcher with a fundamental research program based at the university. I could pick there are a dozen people at the campus. I could pick and show the same slide. He set up this company that does diagnostic imaging, so it can detect breast cancer or COVID in patients, and the company's doing extremely well, receiving good support. And the reason that I show you Patrick is because if he were here right now, he would tell you that the fact that he's done this and set up this business has enhanced his academic research profile and his fundamental research. He says that he finds it easier to get funding for his academic program. He's still a professor at the University of Sydney, still a very successful, recognised researcher, but what this has done is enhance his career, not take away from his academic profile. And I want to show you that that's possible. People don't necessarily think of commercialisation as part of what they would normally be achieving in a conventional academic career, but it's absolutely possible. And in fact, the people who do this successfully are very well recognised. These two researchers, Tony Weiss is one of our professors here at University of Sydney, who set up a company, Elastogen, that does artificial skin. That was the biggest ever biomedical sale in Australia when that company was sold to Allergan. And Tony is still a professor at University of Sydney, but very well recognised for that achievement. And this young man's Michael Bowen. He's one of our more younger, very successful entrepreneurial researchers here at the university. He's a co-founder of a company called Pinoxis that produce a drug that helps with addiction issues. And they were both awarded Prime Minister's Prizes for Science last year and are both still successful fundamental researchers here at the university. I'm going to run out of time very quickly. So the first port of call, if you're considering commercialising activity, is our commercialisation office in research portfolio. I don't think they go by CDIP anymore, but it's just called the commercialisation office. They partner to help researchers and innovators. Now, I should say there are two main pathways to commercialising research. What I've been kind of talking about here is setting up a startup business and having your own venture, but a lot, in fact, most university research is commercialized through licensing the intellectual property to a company who choose to commercialize that activity. So that's also a important option for commercializing research. So these guys are the university's contact for supporting researchers in how to learn about intellectual property, how you might commercialize it, and they undertake the processes that are involved with that. So helping you to either patent or license or record your inventions, and they have some training programs that help with that type of activity. They run various seed funds. There's a proof of concept fund. You can get some funding to, I think it's sort of up to about $100,000 to show that you can produce something to be commercialized, and help with all of the agreements that are involved. They run a program called Train to Engage. This is probably the best way to learn about how to manage and commercialize intellectual property. This is an example of one of the modules they run this course every couple of months. So I think there's one in April and there's one in May or June. So just go to the, just kind of search for it on the university intranet and you'll find information about the next dates. All right, I'm almost out of time. So I will just quickly show you that University of Sydney already do pretty well on the GO8 basis in terms of the number of startups and spin-outs. We have some really successful companies. So if you see on the left here, University had more startups and spin-outs between 2017 and 2019 than any other university in Australia. And we do pretty well in terms of the second, in terms of the number of active startups and spin-outs. I'll just skip through. And I'll finish here because I know I'm out of time. So we have a range of different, there's a whole ecosystem of resources that are available to support researchers who are going through this journey. So there are programs to support developing the idea and working out if there's a market for that idea. We have a kind of a workshop and accelerated type program called Incubate that researchers can go through to get training in the process of setting up their business. And we have various support places for businesses once they are created. So we have the Knowledge Hub here on campus. We're part owners of Sukhariya, and which is another co-working space. And there are really a very wide range of these types of accelerator programs and other support mechanisms. And I'll finish up there.
Speaker, I will introduce Natasha Rowling. Natasha is the investment manager for UNICEF and is a tech entrepreneur that founded
Okay, so I'm going to whip through this to a bit of a hail of stories on our UNICEF boards. So I'm going to be talking about the value of death and how you can do something about it, which is build a bridge. Okay, so a bit about me. I think it's all been said, really. Yeah, ex-entrepreneur, ex-corporate product developer and marketer, and now investor. So a bit about UniSeed. We're an early stage deep technology fund that basically invests in things that can change the world for the better. And we think of ourselves as change agents in our communities, bringing diverse groups of people together to create the future that we all want. And that's why I really love Sydney Nano. I love the fact that it's across faculty and they work on big projects that have some sort of application in the real world for impact. So the valley of death, if you didn't know, is actually that space, I guess, in between when grants end and when an invention can actually be invested in. And it's really hard to invest in early stage deep technology. There's not a lot of supporters of it because it's high risk in both business and it's also high risk in technology. And that's why UniSeed was created 20 years ago to fill this valley of death. But beware that with UniSeed, we need a working prototype and a lead molecule if you're doing bio. So we don't invest in research ideas, we invest in things that have been proven. So the bridge is a commercial story, and the foundation of the bridge is actually customer conversations. And so if you want to commercialize research, it's really important that you have conversations to understand that you're solving a real world problem, because if there's no problem, there's no business. I think Julie made a really good sort of wrap up of that. There's more and more grants available in this area, but they have a commercial focus. I sit on the New South Wales Physical Sciences fund, and really nothing much gets through without a commercial plan. So whether you're talking to me as an investor or you're going for these new types of grants, of which there are many, many more, and hopefully more with this new Accelerating Australia plan, you're going to have to be talking to customers, and that's the bridge that you can build. I also want to talk about the relationship between profit and impact. It's something that universities don't like thinking about very much, but really every impactful solution most of the time needs a business pathway. And the more profit you get, the more impact you can create, right? The more people you can help, if it's patients or, with climate tech, hopefully you're helping the whole planet. And the things to keep in mind, as I said, you're solving a real problem, and also that it's a big enough problem that enough customers will pay for. Really, the cost to commercialize, has got to be less than the bottom line. If it's the other way around, it's not really going to work. And I'd just like to reiterate too, there's a lot of space given to startups, and it's not just the only business pathway, right? And actually the others are much preferred because they're a lot less risky. So think about license agreements, industry collaborations, research contracts. They're also really valid for impact, and will probably get you there a lot quicker. So, although I come from the startup world, I really recognize that these other avenues are also equally as valid. But they also need customer conversations, right? And I wanted to talk to you today about the good, the bad, and the ugly conversations that I've had with researchers over my years. I've taken out the university. I used to have this in my presentation, but I feel like probably people can be identified too much, so I don't want to do that. That's not the point of this. But, really, when I'm talking to someone, I want to hear about the conversations they've had with customers. And I'll go through that a bit. So this is actually, these are real conversations I've had, but they actually show you, I've probably had 10 or 20 conversations that are very similar in my time with UniSeed. So this is a good one. I just need 600,000 to finish this project. Everyone will want to buy it. All it needs is good marketing. As a career marketer, that really annoyed me, I can tell you. They had not spoken to a single customer. They were guessing what the market wanted. And this was software. So that already puts you in a different swimming lane. If people are going to invest in software, they want to see customers and they want to see a minimal viable product. So, I really had, honestly, hard words with this researcher to make sure that that he really understood what he was facing here. This is a really common one in my conversations with researcher. It does this and it does that and it does this and this, and it can be used for this market, and it can be used for that market, and maybe that market too. And, we see a lot of platform technologies, but that's almost worse than having no customer conversations, because as an investor, I have no idea what market will go first. And usually it should be the one that's closest to money. It's not necessarily always the biggest market. It's the market that's going to give you money first, because that's going to keep you alive longer. So, again, it was a guess, and didn't really help with the minimal viable product, which is also really important in deep technology, probably more important than software. I'll try and remember what this, there is nothing else like this on the market. No competitive analysis was done. If you speak to customers, they pretty much tell you very, very quickly whether you've got something that's competitive or not in market. And this poor researcher actually spent his own money on a patent for this technology that really was of no interest anywhere, because there was too many similar things out there doing the same thing. So it's something to keep in mind. This was another one. Everyone wants a solution that will kill the fat cat incumbents in this space. This was actually really interesting. This one did get investment, actually. And but they had to pivot 3 or 4 times before they actually found the right market. So what I was going to say is customer conversations never ever stop. And actually where you start when you're in business is not often where you end up. You find another pathway that you are meeting a greater need. And so that's something to really keep in mind. So can I talk about my latest experiment? So this was a conversation I organised between the head of a faculty and the head of a very large corporation in the same space. And, you know, basically I thought, isn't this great? This industry guy can come and talk about all the big problems he's trying to solve. And this researcher can listen, and all the researcher wanted to do was talk about their latest experiment. What a wasted opportunity. It was such a cool experiment, but he took up a whole hour of the time. And I apologized to the industry person afterwards. I've never done that again. Or if I did it again, I would really make sure that, you know, I had a researcher along who really knew that we were, well, I think he did know, but, you know, we're talking about problems here and maybe getting you thinking about some solutions in the space. But it's really obvious that listening is your superpower. And also dumb your science down so that your grandma can understand it, your 3-year-old child can understand it. You know, that's really important when you're trying to get your ideas out there. If you're too specific about things, then people are not going to understand what you're doing, and it's a harder sell. But these are the really great conversations I've had, and these, for the most part, have led to investment either through us or someone else. So Foresight, this is a smart motorcycle helmet, UNSW industrial design capstone project, solving his own problem. How long have I got? 1 minute? Okay. So he'd done customer questionnaires. That was super cool. That's why I invested. Wildlife Drones had $160,000 of customer order forms sitting there. BioScout, we're just about to announce that investment, probably. Don't spread the word. So that's through USID, and they're still working on, you know, where after many years they found their first customer group, I guess, to go to. And of course, Abyss also came out of Sydney University. That's it. Thank you so much.
Maybe we have time for 1 or 2 questions. We have time for 1 or 2 questions. I know some of our attendees are in Zoom land, so it might be worthwhile for us to capture those questions in the interest of time, and we'll try to get back to those who have asked them. So any questions in the audience? Yes, Julie, would you like to come forward, please? Yep. And Natasha. Question?
So Natasha, when researchers are thinking about an investment, do they come to you when they're ready for investment, or should they kind of form this relationship with you to kind of, you know, yeah. Oftentimes I have researchers come to me where they are fearful of coming to someone like you because they're not ready, and I always advise them that you can help them get ready.
Yeah, absolutely. We speak to researchers quite often for years and years before we make an investment. We get to know them, we get to know their work, it's on our radar, we do industry introductions, we sort of help form their pitch. And whether we invest in them or not, that's okay, because we're here as university partners. So I think it's really good to socialise your ideas as early as possible, especially with potential customers, to really, you know, keep your research on track for meeting a problem. Thank you.
So we do have 1 question, and I think might be for Julie here, which is coming from Debbie Black via Zoom. Julie, how will Sydney Uni work with industry and retain their IP? And will they commit to their academics not stealing IP? So perhaps maybe about IP, how the university manages IP.
Yeah, look, is it that one or this one?
You can stand in the middle there if you don't mind, Julie. In the yeah.
I guess the question was, how can we allow industry to retain their IP, and how do we stop the researchers from stealing the IP? Look, every industry, university research collaboration has a pre-negotiated IP agreement, and there's you know, a typical agreement. You know, there are agreements where the IP belongs to the industry partner. There are other agreements where, for example, the IP belongs to the university, but there's some kind of pre-negotiated licensing arrangement with the company. But every deal is different, and it really depends on how much background IP or where the IP is going to be developed within the collaboration. So I know that's not a very straightforward answer, but I guess what I would say is that if you have, we don't enter into research agreements that don't have IP terms in them, so that there should be clarity already about how the intellectual property will be distributed within the research collaboration. So there shouldn't ever be a situation where a university researcher can steal intellectual property from a company in an agreement that we have.
So thank you, Julie. I think we're going to stop there in the interest of time, and thank our speakers as well as the chair of the session, Professor Kentai. Session, and in this session I'd like to switch gears a little bit and introduce a panel of excellent speakers here to tell us a little bit about their journey.
May I ask you to use this one because it's going to be...
Okay, what about that? Yeah. And we will hear from the speakers tell us some snapshots of their experiences on their journey of commercialization, the challenges, the difficulties, the rewards, perhaps as they succeeded through it. First up, also we will hear from Salah Williams, who is CEO of Sukhariya Innovations, who's joining us online. And Salah also has quite an excellent track record in commercialization and work, including some 12 years as an executive manager in Google. Salah, are you with us?
I am, and I'm hoping, can you see my slides?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, woohoo, we are winning, and you can hear me okay in the room.
Pretty okay, please proceed.
Brilliant, thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me to participate today. And just to let you know, I'm actually on holidays, but I'm faking it with the backdrop from Sukhariya Innovations behind me on Zoom. Love technology. So I want to talk about a few things, and I think actually they fit really nicely with some of the things Natasha was saying early. And what I want to talk to you about really quickly and really briefly is a little bit about Sukhariya Innovations, but really unlock the pathway to commercializations. So let me kick off with a little bit about Sukhariya Innovations. So we are the home of deep tech in Australia. We're 22 years old in August this year. And we've got a very long history of actually growing deep tech ventures all the way from idea to exit. So Elastogen was actually a resident here at Sukhariya Innovations, and we're an investor and a supporter and a mentor in their journey. Julian, another spin out from University of Sydney, is currently a resident here, and we've had a very long collaboration with both the research but the commercialization pathway. Deep tech takes a really long time to come to market, and so that early stage kind of support mechanism is around grants, it is around funding, but it's all around mentoring and connections and pathway to market and that customer discovery journey, and all of those things are things that we excel at. Out of the 6 or so exits that we've had to date, we've had over 1.3 billion returned to the shareholders of those companies. And sometimes that's the universities and sometimes it's us, but we're not exclusively looking after spin outs from universities. Right now, we have over 50 residents in the incubator that you can sort of see on the screen behind me, employing about 540 people, doing everything from life sciences, including devices, diagnostics, therapeutics, software as a medical device, ag tech companies. We're the home of the National Space Industry Hub. We have new materials companies. We have quantum companies. We have hardware and vision and machine learning companies. We have lots of people doing really interesting things, and they live here for quite some time as we support them to market. And last year, one of our residents, Clarity, had the largest life sciences listing on the ASX in its history when they listed on the ASX. We've also helped our residents and alumni raise over $1 billion worth of funds in the time that we've been operating. And we run some of the largest commercialisation training programs for both the state and Australia. So if any of you are interested in learning about that journey, definitely just head on over to our website and check it out. If you've got anything health related, we have a whole bunch of free programs. We're supported by New South Wales Health to run commercialisation for the entire state in the medtech sector and the health tech sector. And that includes devices, diagnostics, therapeutics, and software as a medical device. And we also have programs in space as well right now, and a few others in ag tech. Ton of stuff. Please come and be a part of it. We'd love to help you. What I want to talk about, though, is riffing on a little bit of what Natasha talked about one of the most important things is not talking about your science or your technology. It's actually learning to communicate your vision, and it's your why. Natasha talked about this as the big problem that you're trying to solve. And I think it's absolutely critical that you get very, very good at communicating this, not only to get buy-in from internally from the university to help you on your journey, but also from investors, from grant recipients, for people to eventually join your team. So I want to give you a couple of examples of why that's more important than actually communicating your science or technology. Oops. Okay, so this is Google's information. I worked at Google for nearly 13 years, and every Googler can tell you what the mission of the company is and the vision of the company is with their eyes closed, standing on their head with a mouthful of water, to organise the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. Now, that mission was created when they were only doing search. They hadn't figured out how to monetize it. They hadn't listed, and there was no such thing as Google Maps. But if you look at what the full suite of products that they now develop and how they actually build a team and support directionally, that vision about organising information and making it universally accessible and useful is the key driver that actually enables people to join them. I want to give you two other quick examples because I think it's really powerful. Regrow is one of our residents here, and they're an ag tech company that uses the power of data and climate science and agronomy to actually unlock the potential and the power of resilient architecture to feed the world and grow profitably. And that means that it gives them a clear definition of what's in scope, what's out of scope, and the size of the market and the opportunity for them. And the last one I want to just give you a quick example of is Zefco. So this is one of our new material resident companies here. And what I love about what they do, and they've done a number of different things. They did a plasma coating technology you would have seen released last year that actually enabled production of masks, of PPE that is actually resistant to COVID. And if you come in contact with COVID, it will actually neutralize it. They don't just do that. They do high performance sporting materials in yachting and things like that. They have spray on plasma coating technology that is actually, far more environmentally friendly to produce with less water, less energy, less chemicals that could actually completely revolutionize how we think about garments and fabrics, and also allows them to last for longer. And their mission is to change the way we make textiles, which is really broad remit, but it allows them to actually paint a vision for the future that not just scientists and engineers working in the field can lean into, but the investors and the people around them. And it's really important that you figure out what your why is and how you can communicate it. I want to talk quickly about mission, and again, there's a lot that we could talk about here today, but I've only got a very short window, and I'd love you to just engage with our community. We're actually here to help you on your commercialization journey, so please check out what we're doing on our website and come along to our programs. But I want to talk about mission and building lean, and this is a little bit something Natasha sort of said. There's lots of tools and there's lots of pathways and there's lots of programs there to help you, but that customer discovery journey and really understanding what the problem space is and why your solution might be better than anything else and actually might have a pathway to market is something you should do. And the only thing it should really cost you is time. It really shouldn't cost you money. And ideally you should be, I think about it as being as cheap and as lazy as possible to get the answer of whether you're actually solving a problem that has a market, that has a market pull through, or not. There's lots of amazing technology out there, but it's not actually fit for purpose, or it's not solving a problem that people will actually pay for a solution for. So there's lots of methodologies out there that can help you validate your idea and validate what your problem is and your solution, your product market fit. It includes things, but it includes a scientific process, which is basically build, measure, and learn. So do something as cheap and as quickly and as possible. Measure it and see whether it actually validates and anybody wants it, and then learn from it and change your ideas and be willing to kind of kill your baby if it's ugly and nobody wants it. You know, we really hard conversations. Every example that Natasha put up, I sort of felt a little bit of pain because I have hundreds of conversations like that myself, and it feels awful. It feels like you're really hurting somebody's dreams and you're a dream crusher. But really, actually, if you do the work up front to kind of go, what is the problem that I want to solve, then actually you're going to find some really good alignment between the kind of really novel and new things that you discover and how they could be applied to solving that solution. I'm not going to talk about business model canvas, minimal viable product and customer discovery, because you really need to come along and do some of those programs with us. And there's lots of resources online. We've got a free foundations program that you can start to learn more about it, but please just do it. If you're going to go on this journey, you need to do these things. It's not negotiable. It's the mark of somebody that actually understands the commercial pathway versus somebody who's just really focused on the research and discovery. And I want to talk about validation in 2 examples. And in the interest of time, I'm just going to say 2 things about Netflix. We all think about streaming and Netflix right now as being, you know, an incredible sort of thing that we probably couldn't have lived without in the last 2 years, with the multiple lockdowns that we've had. But it actually started as a video rental company. And one of the things they did to validate their idea, and I know Reed, who founded the company, but one of the things they actually did to validate their idea was send out a list of all the movies that were available on DVD and see which ones people were interested in watching, and, you know, create demand just in a simple online form to know what to buy before they sent it out to people. And that was long before we really had the power of Wi-Fi and the internet to actually drive streaming, but they could see that in the future that would be a possibility. So their problem that they were solving was not on-demand streaming. Their problem that they were solving is that people want to be connected and see things at a time and a place that's convenient for them. Going to give you 2 sort of just a really quick sort of snapshot about how to think about this long term as well. So one of the things with the problem space that you're talking about, you do need to think long term, and with deep tech, you need to be prepared that the pathway to market is very, very long. So on the bottom of this screen, you can see Wi-Fi started with a discovery in 1977, but really didn't see massive global adoption, and we didn't see all of these companies building off the power of it until 2013 onwards, right? And it's only been, and I think in the last year, we've seen Australian businesses finally adopting things at scale in a transformation process that is going to continue to carry on forward. Similarly, I think at the top, what I wanted to paint for you here is a picture of Google's mission statement of organizing the world's information and making it universally accessible and useful, and just highlight a couple of things of what it means to kind of be really focused on that mission and on that problem space. So the idea for Street View happened in 2004. So this is the cars that drove around and visually captured imagery and to display it on map. But in 2004, Google Maps didn't even exist as a website. They'd only actually acquired it in 2004 as well. And they certainly didn't have global satellite imagery. So Google Earth didn't exist. And in fact, you didn't even have a smart device that had the power to put a map on your phone back then. So we had tier 2 devices. And so that was the same year they actually acquired Android technology to actually kind of go on this journey to build hardware that would eventually be capable of the vision and bringing it to life. And so what that looks like in practice with launching and iterating and actually testing and validating your idea is something like this. On the left-hand side, you see the beta version of Google Maps with the very old logo, which was on a website. It was on a physical fixed infrastructure in your office, and that wasn't mobile. And the right-hand side is that augmented reality that Larry Page actually envisioned back in 2004, that we would have a device in our hand that would help us navigate the world and find what we needed to do really easily. So when you're obsessive about your why, you make different decisions in how you bring your company to life, and actually thinking about these things and understanding this is part of commercialization. It's not just the research and proving the science. It's actually understanding the commercial realities of how you get there. The last thing I'm going to talk about really quickly, because I'm sure I'm pretty much at time, is culture, and it's a reinforcing driver. And the three things I just want to say about this is team is critical. There is no heroes in being just a solo individual in this. You need to think about who is on your team and whether they're on your team full-time or whether they're on your team as an advocate, a supporter, or an advisor. And I just want to say it is a really important thing. Good ideas can come from anywhere. And when you're building a team, you need to create an environment for that to flourish. Don't expect as a leader or as a founder that you have the single source of truth or the answer for everything. The second one is process, and it's launch and iterative. Just like you actually go through a research methodology to discover the fundamental breakthroughs that you do, building a business is exactly the same. So launch and iterate, launch and iterate. Don't let perfection be the enemy of progress, of building your business. And then the last one I think is really critical is values. And I think for me, the three that come through that are actually critical to the success of an organization like Google or any of the companies that we see growing and thriving here at Sukhariya around trust, transparency, and the freedom to try and the freedom to fail. It is not a marathon building company. It is a series of ultra marathons, and it is exhausting. And there are very high highs and very, very low lows. And you need to be in a team and in a community and tap into all of these resources around you to help you support you on your journey, because it is a long one. And it is going to be a lonely one. But it is something that, you know, if you're obsessed with the problem that you're trying to solve, it'll probably be one of the best things you'll ever do in your life. And with that, I'm going to leave you a little quote from Henry Ford, which I really love, because failure is a reality of startup land and it's a reality of commercialization. But actually, it's just an opportunity to begin again and do it more wisely with the learnings that we have. And one of the great foundations you have as researchers in a university is you're an institution of learning and knowledge. And I think taking that ability to learn and be a learner on this journey is critically important. That was pretty fast. Hopefully that was useful, and I'll pause there. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally-Ann. And we will have time for questions in the upcoming panel discussion after this. Next speaker, it's my delight to introduce Professor Salah Sukhariya, who is a professor of robotics and intelligent systems here at the Faculty of Engineering at the University of Sydney. Salah is well known to be an innovator, a problem solver, and a real role model in the area of commercialization. He's won many, many awards, too many to mention today, and also he's got a tremendous history of industry engagement with companies like Qantas and also many, many other companies, major like Rio Tinto, for example. And Salah has experienced innovation and commercialization. He has had an experience where he has stepped out from the university, he stepped back in, and it is a pleasure to introduce you, Salah. Please come forward to share some of your insights and experiences in your journey. Thanks, Salah.
Use this. Yep, good morning, everyone. There we go. Okay, Ali asked me to talk a little bit about spinning out the ag robotics work that we did, and also talking a bit more about commercialization. Listening to all the talks that we've had before, I'm just going to change a few words as we go through, just so that you can understand the different levels of commercialization that I've been through. That might be an opportunity as well. So I come from a group called the Australian Centre of Field Robotics, which is in the Faculty of Engineering, if anyone doesn't know, and we've had a long history of engagement with industry. So some of the work that I've done in the past has included Rio Tinto. We've had a 10-year or over 10-year contract, almost a 10-year contract with Qantas, and there's been a lot of different aerospace companies, both BAE Systems, Boeing, etc., along the way. For me, that's been personally quite an enjoyable journey. It kind of, was it Natasha, I think, I can't remember what it was impact equals profit equals impact. When you start to engage with these industry partners and you start to get some significant industry grants, that's a great thing. You start to build up a team, but that also gives you recognition for the next industry grant as well. And you kind of get this positive cycle effect that happens through that. In many of those cases, it's been a story of doing some R&D. It's almost outsourced R&D from an industry perspective, but it gets licensed back into the industry, allows you to then use that research in other industries as well. So you get that opportunity to be able to get a significant project with an industry partner that could be in mining, but then you can start to use a lot of those ideas in aviation as well. So it gives you that mechanism for those who are not sure yet about whether to go into startup or spin out world or whatever that might be, to kind of really have that engagement. It teaches you a lot about their thinking, about their business models internally, about what they see value in terms of the research. And when you kind of have those discussions, it helps a lot in terms of turning your terminology around and trying to understand how they think. What I'm going to talk about a little bit is slightly different kind of process that we went through, which is around the agrobotics work. So in parallel to mining and aviation and aerospace, I was also doing some work in agriculture. It started off in environments and using robotics and environmental monitoring. And then that got wind into farming sector, and then we started to get some grants in agriculture. And unlike mining, where you have a big player, and aviation, where you have a big player, or aerospace, where you have a big player, agriculture is all over the place. There are funding bodies everywhere, which may sound like a good thing, but there's also 10 funding bodies, 50 different voices that come through. So you've got to kind of meander through that. But over those last 15 years, fortunate enough to get it probably close to $30 million worth of R&D funding from different groups. And that's allowed us to do things from the beginning where I remember my first conference, going into an industry conference for agriculture back in 2009, I think it was 10, and talking about the potential for robotics in agriculture and almost getting laughed off stage. And then you kind of go through these years of where you start to collect a lot of this funding and you start to prove out the different ideas as you're going through. And it's as I was mentioning before, deep tech is quite hard. Hardware tech is, as they say, hard as well. You combine the two things together when you're talking about robots and AI and sensors and putting them out 24/7, all weather conditions. It's quite a difficult space to work in. But very fortunate to get all this different type of funding, which has again allowed us to build up and prove a lot of the ideas. It may look like a bunch of widgets that we kind of ran around, but we were at the top left-hand picture was back in 2005, where you couldn't buy a drone off the shelf. So we had to build our own drones, put our own autopilots, put our own nav systems, and start to go out there, talk and engage with the farmers. And then the bottom right-hand picture is when you start to get real-time AI from those drones. This is back in 2014, and start to build up maps of the environment. Likewise, this is on ground robotics and looking at different applications of ground robotics, again, back on that funding mechanism through those different agencies. And you start to build these widgets, these tools, again, build the robots, build the tools, build the sensors, build the AI algorithms, start to piece them together. But as mentioned before, customer engagement was so important, right? So you were dealing now with the end user, and the end user was a farmer. And so even under the research capacity, you weren't thinking as a startup, you were just thinking about, well, what were the big problems that the farmer faced and how long would that take? That would take 2 years, and now I've got to get this amount of funding from the government, from a levy body, et cetera, to kind of bring out that technology. We were doing fundamental technology, so we're still doing fundamentals around AI algorithms and what that looked like, building new tools using 3D printing, tools that were never used before, everything from optimization theory all the way through to the experimental analysis, et cetera. So we're doing all that elements together and then proving them out in the field on farm. And this is just some examples of different robots that we've built and using in different farms, both in Australia as well as overseas. So we got to the point where R&D probably didn't matter that much anymore, right? It was like got to the point where you're getting little, you're kind of eating at the 0.5% of the research. It wasn't that significant anymore. And you started to look at what you had to do next. And there was no one out there that could take this technology and then commercialize it at the end of the day, because there was so much knowledge that was built in it in that way. And you couldn't just kind of hand it over. And people weren't ready for it at the time, but the industry wanted the robotic tools, and we were doing a number of different commercial elements. So this is another thing as researchers getting funding from the industry, whatever it might be, or even the research councils. But within that research program, starting to look at how do you validate that commercially? So even looking at it inside the universities, I think an important element. That helped us a lot to understand, for example, that if I was going to build a widget that was going to do weeding for a farmer, there was no point putting a $50,000 weeding tool on a robot because a farmer wasn't going to buy it. So you had to kind of rethink about how you were going to do the different tech. So given that there was nowhere kind of license this technology out, one of the ideas that floated around was, why don't we just spin out? So talking about IP, as Julie's mentioned before, all the patents, the tech know-how, et cetera, was owned by the university, right? There's some work was going through the IP agreements that we had with the industry partners. So there was some shared agreement between the universities and the partners. And so the really only thing that could happen here was, in this case, spin out the technology. So it's different from a startup. So that terminology, I think, is important for us as, from an academic perspective to understand it. Startup in one way, but a spin out in this particular case is you really following the IP through that technology process and walking with it as you go into that next step. And in most cases, in our case, this was back in 2019, the university had an agreement with Uniseed about how it would commercialise IP. Uniseed looked at it, and we became what they call the lead investor, and then take it out to market to try and attract. And we had Bridge Lane and Carthona come into the picture as well to invest into that, into a company that was established called Ageris. And in a classic spin out, as a researcher, you might sit there as a CSO, like the chief science officer or something like that. You bring in a CEO, bring in probably a CTO, et cetera, and you act as a bit of a consultant to the company. That's probably in the classic sense. This one was a little bit harder. In this particular case, because there's a lot of deep tech and a lot of knowledge over the years. And the option that popped up was for me to take on that role. And in that particular case, there's arrangements for the university, we can take on a secondment, right? And that's what happened to me over the last 3 years, was to go out of the university. Part of my time was still within the university. A lot of my time was spent, suppose theoretically 60% in the company, translate that to 6,000%, but that's what you end up doing. But you get a secondment agreement where the company then pays back your salary to the university, and the university then uses that money for whatever it might be to kind of pay for your teaching or whatever it might be. So that's just another different pathway in that process that potentially is an opportunity. But my last slide, it was a lot of fun, right? It was a lot of fun being able to do this. We ended up taking what was a purpose-built platform, then figuring out how to manufacture it, and then engaging with a manufacturing partner, building 5 robots a month as you're going through. So there you've got this ability to kind of see what your research would look like on a manufacturing level. It's not easy in terms of the activity that you need to go through. For every one researcher postdoc that you thought you had, you need 10 engineers in a company just to do that, because you're going from an idea now to ruggedizing and proving software, hardware, making it work 24/7. And as you move up that TRL level, for those who understand the technology readiness levels, you just keep multiplying by 10 the amount of people that you need in the business to kind of keep that process going on. It just gets that little bit harder. And then straight away, Sally talked about team, so important. Bring on that commercial person, bring on that marketing person straight away, bring on that person who's going to help you with the technology front. That's an important element. Bring on someone who's going to help you with HR. You're used to the university environment where you're coming along and you need to hire, and you've got a HR admin kind of group within there. You're the HR person to start with. You're the commercial person, the marketing person, etc. So there's a lot to do in that space. As Sally mentioned, it is a marathon within marathons. It's probably more like it's like thousands of sprints within marathons. There are ups and downs, and you've got to kind of take that course as you're going through. But I wouldn't look back and say that I regret it. In fact, I'd do it again. It's a nice opportunity to kind of see how your research gets out there. So thank you.
Thank you, Salah. Next speaker, next panelist is Dr. Mobin Nomba from Scimitar Ventures. And Scimitar Ventures is a company that is kind of an extension of the success of the university, if you like. Mobin being an alumnus from the University of Sydney, chemical engineering. And I'd like to welcome you, Mobin, to the podium here to tell us a little bit about your journey with Scimitar Ventures. And as a matter of disclosure, I happen to be also founder director of Scimitar Ventures. So thank you, Mobin. Over to you. Thank you.
Okay, so I think I'm being heard. That's good. So microphone works. Okay, let me kick that off. Annie invited me here to share a bit of a story about what Scimitar went through. And for that story to make sense, I have to explain really what we do first, and then everything falls into place. So just bear with me for the first 5 minutes, and then everything makes sense. So what is and who is Scimitar Ventures? Scimitar Ventures is a company that we built with Ali 6 years ago, roughly. And what we do is deep tech research and development and demonstration type projects combined with commercialization. Around 6 years ago, we identified a gap in the innovation market. And the gap was there's a lot of decent research is being done on one side. And on the other side, you've got a lot of people with experience and entrepreneurship, a lot of years of operation of successful business under their belt. And then what happened was they wanted to do the deep tech projects, didn't have the technology expertise. We had researchers who wanted to do commercialization, didn't know how to commercialize, and everything was a bit disconnected. So we almost get caught in that space because we had expertise in the same space. So we have heard about customer discussions. So Simita Ventures is a result of a lot of customer discussions. None of those ideas came from us. So I tell that upfront. It actually, we just listened really carefully to our customers, and we ideated this and we built this business, which I'm going to share with you. So the consequence of what we create is really market ready, is important, market ready Australian deep tech solutions. And all of them are first or second time in the world that they've been done. So they're all for global impact. If that's not that type of project, we just don't do it. It's not exciting enough. And that's why we've got the term venture, or the name venture, behind Simita Ventures. So we are not an investment firm. We're actually going and doing the R&D and technology development on the ground, building it with the entrepreneurs and researchers with us. And the most important thing, which is our actual product, what we call is Falcon, is the process of going through this journey. It's our proprietary execution blueprint that we have created along the way to enable this to be done over and over again and very reliably. So this graph is what I really like about. It's a really combination of scientists, engineers, and entrepreneurs coming together, a team of roughly 20 at the moment. So we've got 20 staff in our team from very diverse backgrounds, ranging from pharmaceuticals to engineering, mechanical engineering, chemical engineering, IoT, etc. And we've got around 400 square meters of lab and office spaces in St. Peter's. You can come and visit at any time. These are the guys that we have helped, but this is not the importance of this slide. The importance of this is diversity and the range that we see coming through our doors and getting out on the other side. And on top of that, so, it's already crazy enough, it's already complex enough. And on top of that, we took it to the next level and we launched 2 spinouts ourselves. One is called Opus, which is a wearable, measures blood glucose non-invasively. And the other one is SimTech Hydrogen, which is essentially a catalyst story. But what we do there is we turn biogas from waste to hydrogen and decarbonize both sectors, the transport sector and the waste industry. So we have been through this a lot. And the funny thing is, again, going back to relationship with customers, we were not in the market. So effectively, if you would Google up Simita Ventures, you wouldn't find anything. The whole business came through word of mouth and people just calling on us and then, introducing us to others. But immediately as we went out, mid last year, we won a couple of awards and we have been in a couple of Tier 1 newspapers. So all of this for what? And I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation is all about how we've done this. And the only thing that we had the courage. We were bold enough to take the risk and serve that customer bases that we are now serving. And now we are framing it as Falcon, which essentially what it does is, apologies. So what it does is it gives, I think this is an older slide. Sorry. So what it does is it gives high value to cost ratio to our clients, speed and reliability. So speed and reliability, those are the 2 terms that are critically important when you want to commercialize a piece of technology or build a piece of technology. If you're not fast enough, someone will do it. There's always someone who's got bigger pocket, more capable team that is going to come and crush you if you're not fast enough to secure your market. So that's really important, and reliability goes with that. Very quickly, I bridge the gap. So that's really what our product is. But this slide is really talk about a lot of points that are already being mentioned by Natasha and Sally and also Salah. So out of these customer discussions, we built a new product in our portfolio and we call them discovery packages. What we've done was we looked at all the conversation that we had so far with customers. We looked at the reason why a lot of deep tech projects fail, and we identified those as risks. And we packaged them in a form that people come along and they can start de-risking their venture from day one. So these 10 different pillars or 10 different activities really talk about the key risks that if you don't address now, they're going to hunt you down. And that ranges from the technology landscape analysis to technology product ideation, pre-feasibility economic analysis, very, very important. And when you combine that with business case venture design activity, essentially you're answering what question? Do you have a product? Are you going to make money? Are you going to survive? Right? So this becomes almost the most popular part of these packages. Now, then out of that, we also, are promoting a concept of CRL or commercial readiness level that goes along with TRL or technology readiness level, which is being talked about more and more often these days. And what you're promoting is, it's very nice that you've got TRLs. That's very good. That's very important. But what is even more important is that to talk about CRLs along with that. So I've got two lines here. I've got the well-paced line and I've got the not an ideal path. So if your TRL is way, way behind your CRL or commercial readiness level, then the issue is there is a high chance that you're not going to have a business. You're going to end up have a very nice technology, very nice piece of science, but no business. And if you don't have business, you're not going to secure investment. You're not going to be able to build your team. You're not going to have the impact that you're after as a business. So you almost always want to be a CRL that is slightly higher than your TRL, and then this is the ideal space that you want to be at. That's commercial conversation is going to help you to define what your product should be, and you have to pivot, and that's part of the journey. Okay, so summarizing everything. So really, what we have commercialized was the how, and we have pivoted twice. And we have pivoted really, really aggressively, because once we started in 2016, we've been a software company, right? We've been a software company trying to commercialize a piece of technology that Ali and I built around AI and designing chemical plants using AIs. The first in the world, nobody has done this before, but the funny thing that we have faced was it was too good. And the issue was we were going to disrupt the whole skill set in engineering space that nobody wanted to get disrupted, right? So that was the issue that we have faced, commercial readiness levels. We have not been aligned with the market that we wanted to disrupt. That's a critical issue. And we stopped, pivoted, and turned back, and we are doing now what you're doing. So we learned a lot of things that I'm talking about through experience and living through the pain, losing money and losing people and staff and all the rest of it. So it's just really, really real. And that's the gap in the innovation market, as mentioned. And the best part, pay by clients, right? We didn't take a cent of investment. All of that was through sales of services, making money, making profit, put it back in the business, investing back in the business, and keep building and learning from our customers more and more and more, right? So that's the key, your engagement with your customer base. And now, we identified that 5 years ago, now is being talked over and over again. The government is spending $2 billion. We have heard of it today. And there have been some very good, interesting articles, like Researchers Do Researchers, done by Michael Crodel, who is a Pro-Vice Chancellor of Innovation in ANU. And this concept is being talked about. So you don't have to be an entrepreneur or become an entrepreneur. You can choose to. We have heard Salah's story. Everyone is different. This is really, really important. Everyone does it differently. That's the art of commercialization. And with that, I just want to summarize that really Falcon is our contribution to the innovation ecosystem. And 5 years ago, 6 years ago, that didn't exist. Now it exists. Now we're around, and we can help you guys to build your company or license out or whatever you want to do with your technology. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mobeen. And at this point in time, I'd like to invite the panelists to the panel table at the front, please. And also invite Rupal Ismin, Director of the Sydney Knowledge Hub, to facilitate this session. Those of you online, you may enter questions in the chat in Zoom, please, and we'll try to get to them. And over to you, Rupal.
I might just start off actually with maybe one question, and then we can take it from the audience. I'd like to, it's hard when we can't see other people's faces, so I just want to give some other people time. So I might just kick off actually to Salah. I thought your story was really interesting about how the commercialization of Agarus was a product of multiple innovations over time. And so, you know, we talked a little bit about kind of the why and the why, and a series of innovations of the how led to, I think, your why. So can you tell me a little bit about kind of, I guess, what did you have this grand vision for kind of the output of Agarus? How early did that start?
Yeah, I mean, there was always as time went on through the R&D program, there was always this opportunity where we sat back and thought, you know what, there's an ability here to go into the commercial space and to spin out a much bigger story, which is around how ag robotics can help the ag industry in general, not just in Australia, but overseas, improve efficiency, productivity, excuse me, all the way through. The moment Agarus started, though, you've then got to go into a very focused mode. So, you know, grand visions stop. They're okay to kind of speak about. I'm happy I'm answering your question. Grand visions kind of stop. You still want to talk about them at events, new investors, etc. But as a commercial entity, you go very much into focus mode, and you've got to start with, I think Natasha pointed out before, the MVP. What is that little thing that you're going to start with, and start to generate the revenue from that? And that may have nothing to do with any of the research that you've built up over you've built up a lot of knowledge and IP, but that first entry into that market could be something very simple and much smaller, but it's about generating that traction that you need and being able to demonstrate both to yourself, your team, and the investors that you're listening to customers and they're actually interested in this tech. And then you start to tackle the vision onto that. So what does that progress? And I think Salim showed how you might go from that idea, and it could be 10 years before that idea actually comes to fruition.
Great. And I guess I'll just wait to see if there's, I don't have the computer in front of me, so I don't know if there's any interesting questions from online.
Yeah, there's a few. Yep. So if you like, I can shoot one at you.
Maybe you can just say one, and I can maybe enhance the question a bit.
Yeah. So there's a question here from David Newen. Uni researchers tend to take short views due to limited grant money. Also, they need to publish their best ideas in order to get grants. Does it mean successful long-term commercial projects can only be afforded by big corporations or backed by big corporations? So this is...
I think one kind of comment around that was that, you know, Salah, you were talking a lot about how a lot of your earlier industry work, you're almost making the market. You know, you were spreading your ideas and developing that market, which, you know, Mobin, you were saying that, you know, your Anali's product wasn't quite ready. Your commercial readiness level wasn't there because perhaps you didn't have that level of industry engagement ahead of time. I don't know if anyone has any comments directly to this question.
I don't agree that researchers have a short view in that process. Sorry, Sally, I'll let you talk.
I think Sally's trying to say something. Yeah, she might want to answer. Go ahead.
You go ahead, Salah, and I'll chime in after you.
Okay, I don't think it's true that have a short view. I mean, you're constrained by what the budget or the funding is, and so you've got to work with that. That's not a problem. And the comment that was the newspaper article that researchers are researchers, not entrepreneurs, etc. I think, but you're still people, right? You're still a person. You can decide what you want in that process. So if you want to act like a researcher, go for it. Your publications are important. Get your grants. They could be $100,000 grant, $1 million grant, but it's all part of your bigger story about where you want to take the research. And if you have the interest and I guess also the capability and the headspace for it to commercialize that, you can then act as that entrepreneur. You've got to learn a different language and a different process, but that's not preventing you from being that.
Sally?
Thanks. So I might just add to that. And I think there's a couple of things with this question that I want to challenge. It's kind of making it a binary statement. And I think if you've ever looked at any decision making and you think about things in a binary way, apart from, you know, computer science, we should never make decisions in that binary outlier. It's not an either or, it's a yes and. And I think you can actually do research and publish, but if you think that you actually might want to commercialize, you just need to get your IP strategy and the process of when you publish in your IP right. And I see Natasha nodding because the VCs are going to ask you for this up front, right? So you've got to make them happy. So go talk to them first before you do that. And in fact, if you're actually going to do a deep tech company that's in something like what SpeedX does here, which is a molecular diagnostics company, you actually do publish, right? They actually have industry-based PhDs coming through the company. They've started with 4 people made redundant in the GFC out of a lab of Johnson & Johnson labs. They're now 140 plus people and growing. They do publish, but they have a really firm IP strategy. So it's about getting those two things working in tandem and understanding that. I think the critical thing to understand is when you're in research mode and you're doing basic research and you're doing fundamental early stage discovery and really pushing boundaries, there's there's skills there that you can apply to commercialization, but your mindset is different about your pathway going forward. And we have to be real, when the rubber meets the road, if you want to commercialize, it's a business, right? You have to think about, I hate to be so harsh, but you have to think about dollars and cents. You have to think about your P&L. You have to think about how are you actually going to stage gate every grant and every commercialization opportunity, plus venture capital, plus the other myriads of capital out there. And not every company needs to be venture backed, by the way, but also the size of like what the market opportunity really is. And you have to kind of develop a whole new skill set in that space and look at it through that lens. So you can't look at it through the same lens and the same mindset as that you're doing from that discovery perspective. And I think that is the critical thing for people to know. If you're going to go down the commercialization pathway, you can sort of, it's challenging to straddle both fields, but we have founders, nearly every founder in our organization here in Sukhariya, resident companies does straddle both fields. They hold adjunct positions elsewhere, but they're full-time in their business. And that's because they need to be at some point, they need to actually make that commitment to running the business. Otherwise, you actually need to recognize that you're going to have to bring in people full-time into that business, and you're going to have to reward and compensate them with equity to do that. So it's not a binary either or, it's about understanding the full breadth of what the process can take and then choosing your own pathway in it. And I also just want to add one thing too, because Salah and I have had this conversation quite a bit recently. You kind of got to, at some point too, decide the type of company you want to be. Not everybody needs to be a unicorn. But if you're going for venture backing, you're probably going to have to fit a certain set of criteria depending on that fund and what their thesis is. But you can actually build a sustainable small business in Australia, which is really profitable and has amazing impact that actually feeds the whole supply chain, both upstream and downstream, with your breakthrough technologies. So it's not a binary outcome, and I just encourage you to explore and get familiar with the breadth of the opportunities.
Great. Yeah, I think that there's been kind of two things that have come up in the last kind of couple of questions, which is about being opportunistic if you want to pursue commercialization, and also kind of deciding what you want, because there's a myriad of kind of directions that you can have as a researcher and roles that you can have as a researcher as you pursue commercialization. We talk a lot about the valley of death as a funding gap, but there's a lot of other gaps I think that are there. So maybe over to Mobin, actually. What are some other kind of gaps that you see for researchers other than the funding gap as they're going up the TRL level?
So I think funding gap is not that serious, to be quite frank. I think what is, if you've got a very good commercial readiness level and you're talking to your clients, almost always you get the funding required. Because you can demonstrate that whoever who's funding your project is going to have a return, and investors are going to invest because they're going to have a return plus the impact. So one of the gaps that we often find is that I guess capability / exposure gap. I don't know how to categorize that, But being out there and seeing a lot of conversations around people who have done commercialization and the journey they took, I think is critical. We don't talk about it a lot. People who are successful, they're successful, and you only hear about them in the news often. And the failures, we don't hear about them. So we don't know why they actually failed. I think there has to be a lot more exposure from the academics to go and stay in the university. So that's why I like really that part of the PhD, industrial PhD part in the action plan, because I think that's actually very critical to have PhDs who experience what does a commercial reality looks like. And it goes beyond the words. So I think that's a very important gap. We are trying to fill part of that gap, but it is not a one entity thing. It is an ecosystem thing. And that support that is around entrepreneurs, whether just pure entrepreneurs or researchers who want to become entrepreneurs, to be able to what they're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm. Great. And I love that you brought kind of the support for entrepreneurs, and we're seeing, as there's more funding and more of a spotlight in research commercialization, we're seeing a dotted landscape for support for research commercialization starting to coalesce a little bit more, which I love. I know the University of Sydney is kind of going in on more grants around this space with other research organizations. Natasha, do you have any thoughts on that? I mean, I guess some opportunities of different organizations collaborating in the space and some potential challenges in that area?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's crazy that in a small country like Australia, we still have our research organisations pit against each other. And, part of that is because of the competitiveness of grants. I think of research as like Olympic swimmers. Like, sometimes they compete as a team in the Olympics, but mostly they hate each other's guts and, and compete against each other most of the time. And I think really we're really clever. We do a lot of research here, but obviously we don't commercialize a lot. And I think if we could actually join forces a bit more, I love what Sydney Nano does cross-faculty, but let's spread that out more into the wider community and actually have more research organisations working together and researchers working together, then we might be able to create something really special and really unique that can create, jobs in the future, impact for the planet, all of those sorts of things. So I'm quite passionate about that one.
Great. I think on that, opportunistic and, vision for the future, on such a positive note, we should end there. So thank you, Sally, and thank you for joining us on your holiday. Natasha, thank you so much. Mobin, Salah, thank you for joining this panel.
Thank you.
Thanks all, and thanks to the panelists, and thanks to Rupal for chairing the panel session. I really hope that with this event today on university research commercializations that we have shed good light on the issue. It is a moving and very fast action being taken in universities to commercialize research, to change the ecosystems, to change the research landscape. And I hope that this event has been helpful to many of you in understanding some of that, and also understanding some of those journeys. As one of the panelists said, it's not just about the successes, but it's also about the failures. There's a lot of learning in the failures, perhaps for another event. So with that, I want to thank all the speakers. I want to thank the audience here in person and online. And we hope to see you again in the future in Sydney Nano events or University of Sydney events on commercialization. And with that, we close the event. Thank you very much.